How do I? See you've met my faithful handyman. Who am I kidding? I'm too broke for a handyman. Hello everyone, and welcome to Working Title, the show where we talk about books, movies, and everything in between. In case you couldn't tell by my very creative intro, we are talking about the greatest movie ever made, the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Because apparently, not everyone in my generation knows about this amazing movie, and I just can't let that slide. So, I'm going to talk about it, and hopefully after this, there will be some more people who love this movie as much as I do. Now, what exactly is Rocky Horror Picture Show, besides the greatest movie in cinematic history? I'm sorry.
I'm going to have to put on my fucking double-seeing glasses because I can't even begin to see the amount of bullshit coming from you.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Anyway, Rocky Horror Picture Show is a 1975 film based off the 1973 stage show, The Rocky Horror Show. Both the movie and the stage show were written by Richard O'Brien. The film stars Jonathan Adams as Dr. Everett Scott, Charles Gray as the criminologist, Peter Hinwood as Rocky Horror, Nell Campbell, at the time going under the name Little Nell, as Columbia, Patricia Quinn as Magenta, Barry Bostwick as Brad Majors, Meatloaf as Eddie, Richard O'Brien as Riff Raff, Susan Sarandon as Janet Weiss, and the ever-amazing Tim Curry as Dr. Frankenfurter. Now, here is where I would normally describe the plot and give an analysis from there, but this movie is really fucking bizarre. The basic story is, after attending their friend's wedding, Brad Majors and Janet Weiss get engaged, so they go to visit their ex-high school science teacher, Dr. Everett Scott, to tell him the news. But, they got a flat tire, so they decide to stop at a very conveniently placed castle to ask if they can borrow the owner's phone. Because remember, this is the 70s, so people did that sort of thing. Don't know why. Socializing is terrifying. After some musical numbers, a person being created Frankenstein style, and some not entirely safe for work scenes, the movie ends. There's a bit more to it than that, but I don't want to spoil the movie. Let's talk about the Rocky Horror Show, because we can't talk about this movie without talking about its predecessor. The Rocky Horror Show is a stage show written by, at the time, out-of-work London actor Richard O'Brien. He reportedly wrote it as a way to occupy himself during winters. It is an ode to science fiction and B horror movies. Now, if you don't know what B movies are, don't worry, neither did I until I was searching this episode. B movies are essentially low-budget movies from the golden age of Hollywood that often were attached to larger-budget movies as part of a double feature.
Science fiction, double feature.
Okay, back to the musical. Over the years, there have been a lot of performances of this show. The first one being on West End, British Broadway, in 1973, and the most recent being the South Africa tour, which ran from 2019 to 2020. Now, some changes were made from the stage show to the film. While some members of the stage show, Tim Curry, Nell Campbell, Richard O'Brien, and Patricia Quinn, did reprise their roles for the film, Meatloaf was also a cast member for the stage show, playing Eddie and Dr. Everett Scott. However, he wasn't a member of the original West End cast. Jonathan Adams, Charles Gray, Peter Hinwood, Barry Bostwick, and Susan Sarandon were all, based on what I could find, only in the film. The casting of Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick was a push from Fox to hire at least some American actors so that the film would be more marketable in the States. Another mild change was that in the original West End production, the song Sweet Transvestite came before Time Warp. This was changed for the film, and the change stayed for a 1990 West End revival. Now, this movie had a budget of $1.4 million, which, by today's standard, would probably get you a short. Yeah, movies are expensive. But this movie was released in 1975, so $1.4 million today is over $7 million. It also made $170 million in the box office, which in today's currency is over $866 million. Parts of the film were shot at Oakley Court, a castle that has since been turned into a hotel that I would kill to stay at. And apparently the filming conditions at the time were so bad that Susan Sarandon got sick with pneumonia while filming. Some costumes and props were actually taken from the stage show and reused in the film. The tank and dummy that were used for the scene where Rocky comes to life were apparently reused from the 1958 film The Revenge of Frankenstein. Rather fitting for the Frankenstein vibe that the movie, in particular the character of Rocky, has. One of the costumes that was film original was the sequined coat that Columbia wore. Which, diverging from the topic for a minute, Columbia's costume is one of my favorites in that whole movie. The title sequence, the one part of the production I've been the most excited to talk about. Now, the film opens with a pair of lips on a black background singing the opening number, Science Fiction Double Feature. This scene caused some very minor controversy because in the original stage show, Science Fiction Double Feature, her was sung by a character named Trixie the Usherette, who was played by Patricia Quinn. Now, the sequence in the film is sung by Richard O'Brien, with Patricia Quinn's lips mouthing the words. However, when Patricia Quinn found out that she wasn't going to be the one singing, she almost didn't do the movie.
The film opened with the iconic Science Fiction, but Patricia almost turned down the celluloid version after learning someone else would sing the title song. Creator Richard O'Brien, and the man who wrote it and played Riff Raff, pinched your song in the movie. Yeah.
I said, you mean I'm not singing science fiction? And they said, no. I said, oh, well, I'm sorry, I don't wish to do your film. Because the only reason I ever accepted it was to sing that song. And they said, well, no. And then John Goldstone, one of the producers, said, come round to my house, which is round the corner. And he said, we'd just like to show you the sets and the costumes. So I go around, look at the sets, and I see a pink laboratory, and I see things called Transylvanians that we didn't have in the show, and motorbikes, and frocks that we didn't have. And I said, oh, I'm doing this.
It's so dreamy. Oh, fantasy free me. So you can't see me. No, not at all.
Happy now.
Happy? Yes. I thought they were going to get Shirley Bassey to sing it, like Goldfinger or something,
Yeah.
because they need a real voice or something. So we was in the car going down to the Bray Studios, Tim Curry, me in the middle, and Richard. And Tim said, by the way, Richard, who is singing science fiction? And Richard said, I am. I said, you bastard.
How dare you?
It's terrible. I wanted to kill him.
To say that this movie is a cult classic would be an understatement. In the nearly 50 years that this film has been around, it has become a beloved movie, especially by those in the LGBT community. However, at the initial time of release, reception was not the best. Roger Ebert, a critic for the Chicago Sun-Times, said that when it was first released, the Rocky Horror Picture Show was ignored by pretty much everyone, including the future fanatics who would eventually count the hundreds of times they'd seen it. My personal favorite review comes from Newsweek in 1978, which said the film was tasteless, plotless, and pointless. So, I don't think they liked it.
Here, no shit, Sherlock.
However, in recent years, maybe earlier, there has been a shift in how both audiences and critics look at the film. Unlike other movies, which after a certain time are pulled from theaters, Rocky Horror was not one of them. Since its initial release in 1975, Fox has continued to air midnight screenings of the movie. Now, I've never personally gone to a screening of this movie, even though I want to. But from what I've been told by both other people and research for this episode, part of the draw for this movie is the audience participation. It's not uncommon to go to a screening and see people dressed in costume, yelling responses at the screen, and even getting up and performing along with the movie. When Disney acquired Fox back in 2019, they had started taking Fox movies and putting them in the infamous Disney Vault. However, they did not do this with Rocky Horror Picture Show, opting to keep the midnight screenings going. And my God, am I thankful for that. We can't deny that the effect Rocky Horror has had on culture is huge. As I mentioned before, its biggest impact has been on members of the LGBT community. In this interview with transgender actress Laverne Cox promoting the 2016 remake, I will not be discussing the remake, she talks about the effect that the movie had on her.
I discovered Rocky Horror Picture Show in college. I was a freshman at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, and one of my friends was like, they were talking about Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I was like, what's that? They were like, you don't know Rocky Horror Picture Show, you must watch Rocky Horror Picture Show. And so we watched it in the dorms, and I was just sort of like, I was transfixed. I was like, what is this? This is amazing. The songs and this Frankenfurter character just really spoke to me, particularly at that time in my life. I was sort of in a gender non-conforming space. I had a shaved head. I was starting to wear makeup and dresses to school every day. I wore false eyelashes every day in ballet class. I was in ballet class with these lashes like that were crazy. And a lot of people didn't realize they were fake eyelashes. They thought I had just these really long lashes. And I saw this movie and I was like, this is me. And the song Don't Dream It Be, it became a personal mantra for me.
And I think this perfectly summarizes how a lot of members of the community feel about this movie. This movie, whether intentionally or not, deals heavily with sexual liberation and androgyny. Am I saying that right? I feel like I'm saying it wrong. I'm going to say it that way. I'm just going to stick with it, but I feel like I'm saying it wrong. I mean, hell, the antagonist of the film is a gay crossdresser. Which, getting off topic for a minute, I don't think Frankenfurter is a villain in a typical sense. Yes, he has villainous tendencies, going so far as actually killing someone. But the only thing, in my opinion, that makes him an antagonist is the fact that the protagonists, Brad and Janet, want to use a phone so they can get help with her flat tire, and Frank is getting in their way of doing that. Okay, back to the topic. Now, it does seem that the community overall has given the general consensus that the bisexuality vibes of this movie are very prevalent. And honestly, I can see that. I mean, Brad is engaged to a woman, which I know is not always an indicator of sexuality, but for sake of argument, it does here. But ends up...
And then they do the old devil's tango
with a man and seemingly enjoys it. Frankenfurter.
And then they do the old devil's tango
with Rocky, Brad, and Janet. It's also implied that he had a relationship with Eddie, but that ended when Eddie and Columbia fell for each other. There's also the ending scene where almost all the characters have a pool orgy. Like I said, this movie is bizarre. With that being said, while it has had a massively positive impact on the LGBT community, there are a few criticisms. A common criticism of the film is that it's problematic, which, by today's standards, yeah, there are aspects that are problematic. The most obvious being in the use of the word transvestite, which is an out-of-date term for a crossdresser. However, what you have to look at is context. I mean, this movie was released nearly 50 years ago. Not everything is going to hold up today. For instance, in the age of third-wave feminism and the girl boss, the character of Janet at the beginning of the film comes off as a one-dimensional female character who only cares about getting a man. What you have to consider is, in the 70s, it wasn't uncommon for a female protagonist to fawn over a man. This was even more prevalent in movies from the 50s, which this movie both satirizes and pays tribute to. An article from Houston Press in 2017 points out the slut-shaming of audiences when screaming slut at Janet. Which, yeah, as a woman myself, that's a little untasteful. Especially when you consider that Janet only does it twice in the entire movie. But she's the only character that gets the label. I have no way to defend that. That's just bad. I guess you can make the argument that that's a problem with the audience and not the movie, especially since the movie doesn't really paint her in that light. But it's still bad. Yeah. So yeah, that's the Rocky Horror Picture Show. While this movie does have its problems, it's overall an amazing movie. There are a few things I didn't talk about, such as the remake from 2016, which I may never talk about. I have mixed feelings on that. That's all you need to know. And the almost forgotten sequel from the 80s that I also will not cover, simply because I haven't seen it. And I don't intend to. So, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and until next time, peace out.
On to the next one, bitches!